This is Bruce Friedman for That's Brooklyn, and our guest today is Emil Jacoby. And as a Holocaust survivor who's been through so much and yet has an attitude of life. And I just wanted to read a short passage here at the Holocaust Memorial Mall in Sheepshead Bay. It's inscribed, "This memorial is dedicated to the eternal memory of the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children methodically murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators during the Holocaust, to the 5 million other innocent human beings who were also murdered under German rule during World War II, to the heroes of the ghettos and the Jewish armed resistance, to the partisans and allied soldiers who fought for freedom, to those who survived the horrors and degradation of the Nazis, to the few righteous among the nations who risked their lives to shield those targeted for death, and to all those who waged battle for freedom and human dignity. Humanity must learn, understand, and remember so that it will never happen again. Remember."
I'm very impressed by what you have read now about this memorial dedication, but I have a question. At the end there was this passage. It says humanity must learn, understand, and remember. Now, we remember, we know what happened, but what do we have to understand is the question here. It says humanity must learn to understand. Now, I'm here with my project, which I'm doing now, after 50 years, that I remembered all the time what happened. I came to believe that without understanding the how could it be done? This is the 6 million enigma which I'm dealing with. We cannot remember because those people who do not understand how it could be done will eventually forget and not remember the Holocaust. So that's why for me it's so important to understand now, after 50 years, how it could be done, that I am now doing everything possible to respond effectively and objectively to those challenges that the deniers of the Holocaust are posing by saying that if we don't understand how it could be done, then how can anybody come and claim?
I'd like to walk with you.
How can they come and verify their claim of 6 million Jews killed? So we remember 6 million Jews killed, but the deniers are challenging us that the 6 million number that is not true, it's a hoax, unless we challenge them and we prove them how it could be done.
All right, now, what we're alluding to here is the fact that Emil Jacoby has written a play.
Yes.
The play
Fifth Question
is called The Fifth Question.
The Fifth Question.
And you, in that fifth question, seek to understand how could it have been done? How could we have lost 6 million Jews?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, before we went on camera, we were looking at the memorial. I'd like to walk over to it with you.
Yes.
Go ahead, walk in front.
This is a broken chimney with at the top it says remember in English, and in Russian, and in Hebrew it says to remember the 6 million. Right? It's very good. And on the bottom there is written all these nations who were victimized by the Nazis during the Holocaust.
But you know, all of the names that are written here Hungary, Poland, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Denmark, Norway, Austria, Lithuania, Russia, Greece. But then there are a few names that are not carved in granite. They are on a white cardboard and
Yes.
printed in black lettering.
Because probably when they started to build this memorial, there was still Soviet Union,
Right.
and they didn't figure out how much space it will take when after the breakup of the Soviet Union, so they have to put down names of certain nations that were part of Soviet Union, like Moldavia and Ukraine, the Ukraine, and there's also a nation there that I saw,
Keep walking.
the Estonia, Latvia were part of the Soviet Union, and the Belarus, which is now independent.
Well, here again, Belarus has recently been added.
Recently added because at that time there was no Belarus. They're part of Soviet Union.
Okay. Now, of course, on this side of the monument, we see Romania,
Yes,
France,
France,
Italy,
Italy,
Ukraine,
Bulgaria,
Bulgaria.
Italy. There are certain
There's
nations.
Belgium. So an awful lot of people from an awful lot of countries, but maybe more important, a lot of backgrounds, a lot of cultures, a lot of ethnic civilization was wiped out.
Yes.
Now, inside this broken chimney, we see barbed wire.
Barbed wire.
And that's certainly very
Symbolizes-
symbolic, yes.
Symbolic, yes. The chimney is symbolic that they burned in the gas chambers and in the crematoriums.
Right.
Millions of people have been burned during the war. And the barbed wires, also the concentration camps have been
Okay.
locked up.
Now, again, I don't want to be the one to plug a play, a serious drama, but at the same time, when something is so relevant to what you started off with, that understanding of how this could be done, your play, The Fifth Question, before you tell us what it's about, why don't you tell us how you came to write it?
Well, after 50 years that I was wondering why God, if there is a God,
Okay.
how could I be spared and not be included into the 6 million? Was I different than my parents, than my two brothers? Was I more deserving to be spared than them? I couldn't believe, couldn't understand, and so I kept arguing with this God, which I hated him for doing all that.
Yes.
So then I realized once in the 1990 or 1991 when it was 91, when 50 years since my parents have been deported to Kamensk-Podolsk and they have been killed. During that time, I got like a vision that this is what I'm looking for. I have to do something for their memory.
You know, Emil, many people say that in each person there is a book. You took it a step further because you wanted your book to come to life.
Yes.
And if I may be just a little corny, you believe in life. You
Yes.
want to see young life and new life not only flourish, but not forget. And the bravest man, if he has no ability to show emotion, is made of stone. This is made of stone. You are not. And we're proud to have you, and we miss those that are gone. But what you must do is write a play, and the play must not be a retelling of somebody else's story, because the play is your story. Now, I want to know why you wrote the fifth question.
Because when I realized that people are not forgetting, but they cannot understand that they believe, that people believe that 6 million Jews have been killed. And those same people who do believe it, they cannot understand. It's so mind-boggling to them. How could the 20th century, such a civilized nation like the German, can they kill some millions, 6 millions of Jews? And how could those 6 million Jews let themselves like sheep to the slaughter?
Right.
How can such a thing happen? So I was seeking to understand and to find this reason how it could be done. And I was focusing, after research in all the libraries, in all the Holocaust museums, I started to focus on the Jewish councils who were the duty was to run the ghettos. And they were nominated by the Nazis to run these ghettos. And I was asking myself, how come they themselves didn't run the ghettos? How could they put the Jews to run their own ghettos? Something fishy must be about that. So then I found out they did it on purpose to have these Jews go passively and willingly on these trains and let them take them to Auschwitz and to other death camps, because the Jewish leaders who were running these ghettos had a certain credibility and authority to let him go silently and quietly without any resistance.
Because of the Jewish councils.
Of the Jewish councils.
But again...
But this doesn't mean that they are guilty. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just explaining historical fact, what took place, that without the Jewish councils, Jewish people would have been killed anyway during that Holocaust, right, but it would never come to such an enormous number as 6 million.
Okay. Now, again, the fifth question, of course, relates to the four questions.
Correct.
The four kashas.
Yes.
The Passover Seder.
Seder.
You, of course, conduct a Seder.
I conduct a Seder, and my purpose was also to create a linkage or a bond between this traditional Seder, in which the four questions have been asked with concerning the Jewish exodus from Egypt as slaves. Mm-hmm. That is a tradition of centuries. And if I would add to the fourth question a fifth question about the Holocaust, that was help to create this bondage and this link between the future generations and us, this generation, so the Holocaust would never be forgotten.
Oh, no, wait. Did you ask the fifth question at your own Seder?
Yeah, I did not. I just created a Haggadah. It's called the Holocaust Haggadah. And I brought it with me to the Seder, when I had a Seder with my own family, with my grandchildren and children. Right. And during the asking of the four questions, I pull out my Haggadah, and I said to my daughter, okay, hold it. Now we are going to ask the fifth question from my Haggadah. And my daughter said, no way, because you're asking something about the Holocaust, and it doesn't go together with the Passover Seder, because our children going to a yeshiva school, and they would not they would not allow to ask the fifth question during the Seder. The Seder is about Passover, and Yom HaShoah is about the Holocaust. You cannot mix these things together. So this was a crisis during that Seder, and we were seeking how to resolve this crisis. And this, I show it in my movie, The Fifth Question, how it come about that my family accepted my Haggadah, The Fifth Question, and asked the fifth question during that Seder, namely, 6 million, how could it be done?
Now, what has the reaction of your family and Jewish scholars and Jewish organizations that study the history of the people, what have scholars at the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, what has their reaction been to what you've done?
They are impressed, and they are supporting my projects, and it's about time that somebody will bring up this controversial topic.
Right.
But not everybody is giving the support for it because of the controversy. Because if I am focusing on a certain segment of Jewish people during the Holocaust, which are the Orthodox people, members of that Jewish council, they feel that they might be inadvertently be blamed for something which they have done during the Holocaust.
Now, question. When we first walked into the memorial area, we read from the stone,
Yes.
from the writing, and it used the words learn and understanding and remember.
Yes.
And the word understand jumped at you.
Right.
The other words you always use, but the word understand.
The first time I see in a Holocaust memorial the word understand, they always keep saying to remember what happened.
Now, do you understand what the councils may have done?
I do understand, not only understand, I have proof in books, in historical books, in which some of them are calling this, of the Jewish councils, their role in their activity as complicity, as collaborations.
Do you consider it that way?
No, I do not. They say, some of them say it is compliance. I call it compliance. Compliance, it doesn't matter how you call it. Even if they had in mind to do good for these Jews in the ghetto, it still helped the Germans, because the Germans put them for this purpose, to do good and to make those people in the ghetto to have trust in their Jewish councils, so they would be able quietly and to move them from these ghettos to Auschwitz and kill them. If they would be rude and brutal like the Germans, there would be uprising. They wanted to avoid it. So even if they have done good for these Jews, making certain things which help them to keep the day-to-day life in the ghetto more not better, but more bearable.
Okay.
They still are guilty of something which I cannot put my finger on.
Now, I want to change the subject a second, because I know that you and people that you know were interviewed by Steven Spielberg's people for video to be a part of the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, D.C. And we're all familiar with a movie called Schindler's List.
Right.
I find it interesting that as moving and stirring as that movie was, it was not Steven Spielberg's first look at the Nazis. He did pure fiction, what you might call a serial, like the old Flash Gordon serials or the Western serials. He did something, called Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was about a superhero type of man who encountered all kinds of terrible enemies, the biggest of which were the Nazis.
Right.
Now, if a man like Spielberg can write pure fiction and can amaze us and thrill us by the exploits of this superhero that fought the Nazis, that's very different from the everyday human beings that fought the Nazis and lost.
Yeah, but
they didn't all lose because you're with us.
unfortunately, you cannot bring to the public a story about the Holocaust unless it's marketable, unless he can make money on that film.
Right.
So he has to put into the story some fictions so that the people will go and pay and go and see it. Otherwise, there is no chance that anybody would make a film that would be marketable. So I am not doing this for money. I'm doing it only telling my story. Whether somebody likes it or not, it's not my business. Maybe,
but I think you're not looking for people to like your story. I think you're asking people to think. There was a movie a number of years ago, a classic. It was called Inherit the Wind, with Frederick March and Spencer Tracy. It was the Scopes monkey trial, and Frederick March was asked, "Can a sponge think?" And he said, "How do I know?" He says, "Well, do you speak to God?" was the question. He said, "If God wants a sponge to think, then a sponge can think. But Mr. Brady, can a sponge think?" Well, the relationship here is you are asking people, do they have the ability to think? Can they understand? Can they remember? And the best way of remembering something good or terrible is to understand it. And it wasn't a matter of just compliance, it was a matter of terror, which is far worse than fear. But it's a matter of what we have and what we can learn from. Now, we're just going to walk through and look at some of these stones because they're not grave markers. It's not morbid. I see this as life.
Yes, empty stones,
Right,
right.
that's right. Because we're not so interested at this particular memorial in talking about...
How could I write down something from my experience? Is it possible?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Who can do this?
Well, we'll talk about it later. There are
Yes.
organizations, and I can give you their names.
Yes.
But they're talking about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Yes.
Now, here is a marker with the names of families.
Yes.
But all the other ones talk about particular concentration camps and death centers, it says. Death center near Lublin. How would you pronounce it?
Majdanek.
Majdanek was the site of one of the war's worst massacres. They want people to recognize that the story is not finished. It's partially unwritten. You ask whether you could add something?
Yes.
I think that is the type of tribute that is needed.
We should be written, you know what?
What?
About Kamenets-Podolsk. I'm wondering if there is a stone about the massacre of 20,000 Hungarian Jews in which my parents have been gunned down.
Right, right.
In a mass grave next to the town Kamenets-Podolsk in the Ukraine. And I was wondering if such a stone does exist here, about Kamenets-Podolsk.
Well, now, we're going to take a look, but right now, I want to say thank you. And
You are very right.
the audience of That's Brooklyn should know that Emil is a friend. I've gotten to know him in the last few weeks, and I learned from you because we talked earlier, there are the teachers and the students. So anytime you want to learn about VCRs, you give me a call. But I
Okay.
think this is a little bit more important.
That's right.
Just a little bit more important, because when VCRs are replaced by the next technology,
Yeah.
this memorial will include the writings of people like yourself, the plays, the books, and the stories. And there's no final word you can say, because there will never be a final solution.
Yeah, that's true.
You see?
You know, I remember the word of Gideon Hausner, the prosecutor of Eichmann's trial in Jerusalem, the mastermind of the Holocaust, in which Eichmann said about the Judenrat that the things about the Judenrat is not only for historians or researchers to deal with, but for everybody who has different views and has different ideas than the historians. And it might change in the future. So everybody has a right and obligation to deal with this Judenrat. It's not only for the historians.